Hong Kong has now seen 10 consecutive weeks of protests with no clear end in sight. On the show this week, we'll be looking at the future of the city in a series of special episodes. Hong Kong in crisis, the road ahead. We'll start by asking what steps might be taken by the SAR and central governments to stabilize Hong Kong once more. And as China and India partake in a high-level mechanism, how likely is a resolution to the Himalayan border dispute? I'm Zhong Shi in for Liu Xin today. Welcome to The Point. It's over 10 weeks since the now abandoned fugitive bill sparked protests in Hong Kong, yet demonstrations and violence continue to rock the city. A spokesman for the Special Administrative Region condemned Sunday's unlawful assemblies as protesters hurled petrol bombs through the streets, some injuring policemen. A top Chinese official overseeing Hong Kong affairs said last Wednesday that the city was experiencing its worst situation since Hong Kong's return in 1997, warning that the central government will not just watch without doing anything if circumstances worsen. So how might the future weeks play out? And as the central government continues its efforts to better connect the city to the mainland with projects such as the Greater Bay Area Vision, why is there such emphatic resistance? Joining me for the discussion today from Hong Kong, Witman Hung, a deputy from the 13th National People's Congress, and here in the Beijing studio with me, Victor Gao, Vice President of the Center for China and Globalization. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. And before we start the discussion, I want to have both of you hear what the Hong Kong police said in a press conference on Monday afternoon.
The photo here shows a rioter attacking a police officer in Tsim Sha Tsui with what is suspected to be a gun. The actions from these rioters are the total opposite of what they promised. We have no choice but to use force to disperse them in order to protect citizens and other police officers.
And let me start with Victor Gao here in the studio. What we're seeing here is not just a simple continuation of the protests. It's a continuation and an escalation in the violence involved in the protests and demonstrations here. And a spokesperson from the SAR government actually branded the protests as unlawful assemblies as they vandalized public property, blocked roads, besieged police stations, and some of them threw petrol bombs at police officers. All of this pointing to the nature of the protests completely shifting and evolving from where things started in the first place. In your opinion, Victor, what really is going on here?
Well, indeed, I think while many Western media still report the situation in Hong Kong as pro-democracy protests, in reality, it's as far from that as possible. I think the better way is to call it riots and violence and attacking the police and destroying the rule of law tradition in Hong Kong. And I would say no government anywhere in the world, in any country or any city, any region, would tolerate such massive violence and the disruption of civic order. Therefore, I think we need to call an apple as an apple rather than confuse the public or confuse the people in Hong Kong or in mainland China as to what exactly is happening. Now, one thing is clear. I think everything needs to be done to respect rule of law tradition in Hong Kong, and everything needs to be done one way or another to defend the basic law and the one country, two system. And I think the situation in Hong Kong is fast reaching a tipping point. Something needs to be done, either by the Hong Kong SAR government itself or by the collaboration and close cooperation and teamwork between the Hong Kong SAR government and the central government in Beijing.
And let me try to get Mr. Han over the phone now. Mr. Han, do you agree with Victor here in our Beijing studio about what is actually going on in the city?
I think I agree to a certain sense that this is not just a normal demonstration or so-called pro-democracy. Okay, it is, to a certain extent, riot and also, a real challenge to law and order in Hong Kong. However, I think I have to disagree with him on the sense that whether it can be, if it cannot be handled by the local government and in its collaboration with the Hong Kong government and probably some mainland authorities. I think the Hong Kong SAR government and the local police have the full capability to handle the situation. I mean, in terms of what needs to be done, I think I'm not a professional police, so I mean they will have ways of handling it.
All right.
In terms of political, I mean I think what we need is all the empathy, all the support from people over the world that indeed we are really not dealing with a pure political demonstration. If it is that way, we have very peaceful way of handling those things. But what we're seeing is people throwing petrol bombs and people charging at police, people using homemade and also some very specialized weapons to attack the police and also other part of the establishment. I think that is really what we're facing, and I think we have ways to handle it, but what we need is understanding and support from
all right, I hear you. Let's talk about how the SAR government and the police have handled the situation. In an earlier interview with CGTN, the Chief Inspector of Hong Kong's police force, Will Kian, said compared to other international law enforcement agencies, the Hong Kong police are using a very constrained level of force. And some have even said the SAR government may have been too restrained when dealing with the unrest. Mr. Hunt, is that your impression and your observation that both the police forces and the SAR government have been very restrained with their level of force and their level of reaction?
I think any force to be used needs to be proportional, right? When we see rioters or protesters charging the police with weapons and also disobeying any requests or commands for them to come down, the police have to exercise certain forces. Now, when you just mentioned whether compared with the other parts of the world, I think every place is distinct. Okay, here in Hong Kong, we have been used to a very peaceful, very respectable environment where most people will obey the rule of law. What is recently happening, I think, really, for me, as somebody who's grown up here, it's really an eye-opener. I think the police has been very, careful in terms of the use of force, but sometimes inevitably, they have to exercise their duty and use force to overpower some of these things who are being harmful to our society. Now, I think it's pointless to compare it with other parts of the world because every place is different. But I have to say it's about proportional. It's about when you are facing the kind of force that being used, you need to exercise certain kind of force so that you can overpower it.
All right, Victor, given how the protesters, not all of them, but some of them, have demonstrated with such extreme ways of demonstration, using weapons, using petrol bombs, do you think there has to be change in how the SAR government and the police forces deal with the situation?
Well, one thing is clear. Everything needs to be done to bring order back to Hong Kong and to bring a full stop to the violence and the chaos and the rioting in Hong Kong. Some of these so-called protesters are actually being paid as missionaries, mercenaries by forces yet to be fully disclosed. They are paid, for example, one person for 2,500 Hong Kong dollars for certain acts, or 2,000 Hong Kong dollars for certain other acts, or $1,500 for certain other acts, and also for $500 for certain activities in the streets. Therefore, these are not so-called protesters themselves. These are being paid as pawns by political forces, yet to be fully brought to justice. And I think the people in the world really need to see through the surface and see the realities on the ground. That is, this is not pro-democracy protests, because Hong Kong is a democracy to start with, and people actually have the legally protected rights to protest and to demonstrate. But you need to do that within the rules of the law. You cannot do the illegal assemblage, for example, because that will be considered as unlawful assembly, and the police has full right to do whatever means possible to disperse the illegally gathered crowds in Hong Kong, as well as in almost all the other large metropolises in the world. Therefore, I think something needs to be done, and it is high time to restore order back to Hong Kong so that people in Hong Kong no longer need to worry about their safety and they can go to work in a normal way.
I'm going to be very frank here, Victor, and ask you this. Is the SAR government limited in its options to deal with the protesters? Because you obviously mentioned their rights to protest there. And given whatever measures the SAR government has taken in the past weeks, doesn't seem to have stopped the protests and demonstrations, and given the escalation in the type of violence used here, is the SAR government well-equipped and prepared enough to up their game?
Well, first of all, the central government here in Beijing has expressed full support to the SAR government, to Carrie Lam as the chief executive, as well as to the Hong Kong police. On the other hand, in reality, we need to see that the police forces in Hong Kong, one of the best police forces in the world, are not equipped or resourced in such a way to deal with such prolonged unrests and chaos and rioting. Why? Because they are trained and brought up as a force to deal with, let's say, criminal offenses in a normal way, and the people in Hong Kong, generally speaking, are very much law-abiding. But this time, apparently, there are political forces behind the scene which have agitated many people and misinformed them, or even paid money so that certain young people, especially college students, are now going to the forefront to battle the police forces, for example. Therefore, I think the central government's unconditional support to the Hong Kong SAR government and the Hong Kong police is absolutely the right thing to do, but something else needs to be done, and this is fast passing through a tipping point. And I think we are all looking forward to the resolute actions to be taken either by the Hong Kong SAR government itself or in conjunction with the central government, with the only aim of abiding by the basic law, defending the one country, two system, and bring order and law back to Hong Kong.
Mr. Han there in Hong Kong, talking about resolute actions from the SAR government. It is safe to assume that the SAR government has taken notice of certain political forces behind the protests and the phenomenon of paid protests, as Victor has mentioned here. What is the SAR government in a position to do going forward?
I think there are certain things. I mean, obviously, at this particular moment, every effort is to be made to bring order back in the SAR government, especially the police force, need to, do whatever it can, and it have to bring peace and order back to Hong Kong. But afterwards, I think it does call for us to reconsider. After 22 years of back to the homeland, after we have been following the one country, two system and everything else, why is there such a large dissatisfaction in the general society, especially our young people? What exactly are they upset about? If we need to really think about it. Personally, from personal point of view, I have always been thinking, when I talk about one country, two system, obviously on the socialist side, we know everything because mainland China has been practicing socialism for, ever since 1949. But here in Hong Kong, when we talk about capitalism, what exactly the kind of system we want, what kind of society do we want. Because what we're seeing is obviously there are certain problems in the society in terms of mobility, in terms of high property price and those things. So I think the Hong government, and all the officials I have met, I mean, they have told me that it is probably the right time, after everything is settled, after the criminals are put into justice, we do need to consider how to maybe look into the details of some of these problems.
I'm sorry to interrupt here, but we're running out of time. There's a lot of tension on what the SAR government plans to do next and what the central government plans to do. We'll keep watching. Witman Hung, Hong Kong deputy, from Hong Kong, deputy of the 13th National People's Congress, and Victor Gao, vice president of the Center for China and Globalization, here with me in Beijing. Gentlemen, thank you so much.